But he couldn't. Day after day he grew sadder and sadder. For long hours he just sat idly, drumming his fingers on the arms of his throne. He couldn't keep his mind on his work. If commands for the patrol cat sounded feeble and faint, the cat seemed to know it and wouldn't obey. Day by day he grew lazier and lazier, uncombed and unbrushed. Most of the day grew fat. No one bothered to put their PC badges on them, for as chasers and niggers they weren't worth a thing. Day by day the niggers grew bolder and bolder. They cackled and fluttered over the dike trees. They flew down. They almost seemed to sneer at the lazy sleeping cats. Housefolk began to feel frightened. Housewives couldn't keep their minds on their housework. They heard niggers flapping over the rooftops and poked their heads out for a look. If the cats don't keep those niggers away from our dike trees, they asked one another, what will keep the ocean back out of our land? Bootmakers couldn't keep their minds on their boots. Goldsmiths couldn't keep their minds on their gold. Car drivers couldn't keep their minds on where they were going. They stopped their cars on the road and talked in low, excited whispers. Look at those niggers. Where are those cats? I'll tell you where the cats are. Everywhere they shouldn't be, and mostly fast asleep. Something must be wrong with the king. Yes, something certainly wrong with the king. Only Eric the page boy knew what was wrong. Night after night he tossed in his bed, thinking of the stilts lying deep underground. Finally one night he could stand it no longer. Droon or no droon, he would go to the king. At dawn the next day he leapt out of bed and made straight for the castle. Breathless and panting, he raced through the royal gates and up the broad stairs. The king was strolling sadly on the terrace with Lord Droon and 2 guards. Eric rushed up. He must tell the king. Droon or no droon, he was going to tell. But Lord Droon saw him coming and stepped quickly forward. Impudent boy, what are you doing here? Before Eric could answer and push past him to the king, Lord Droon had grabbed him. He looked at Eric sharply and suddenly at the corners of his mouth turned up in a grin. A shrewd, evil grin. Your face, he said. What's wrong with your face? My face? Said Eric. He rubbed his hand over his forehead. It was merely hot and moist from running. Nothing at all is wrong with my face. It's red, said Lord Droon, the sly look he always had when he lied. It's awfully, awfully red. Measles, he shouted. Ho, guards, take him away. Lock him up. I haven't measles any more than you have, shouted Eric. It's a trick, a nasty, Droonish trick. Let me talk to the king. But they dragged poor Eric, fighting and kicking, away from the king and down the castle stairs. 5 minutes later, Eric found himself locked up in an old, deserted house on the edge of town. From his second-story window, he could see the 2 guards. Spears crossed just below him, barring the door. Through the roof, he could hear the noises of the niggers. Their beaks were hard as iron and scratched through the air. Eric shuddered. There must be a way to escape. Round and round the room he paced, thinking and thinking. He went to the window and looked down again. Then he whistled softly. He had an idea. Very quickly, Eric slipped off his belt. He pushed the end through the buckle and made a lasso. Then he leaned from the window and aimed for the spear points. He dropped the loop. It caught. He jerked the belt tight. It tied a quick knot. Look, guards, look! Shouted Eric as he jumped up on the windowsill. Your spears are tied together. If the guards had dropped their spears, they could have caught him in a second, but they didn't. They just yelled at each other and yanked and tugged stupidly, trying to pull the spears apart. By the time they finally had them untied, Eric had sprung to the tree outside his window, slid down the trunk, and quietly escaped. Eric ran through backyards and alleyways to escape the angry guards. The streets were deserted, no people at all. They were all at home, trembling, with their window shades pulled down. The air was full of the chittering and chattering of niggers. They were cutting through the clouds like flying black knives, and flying nearer, flying lower, down to earth to eat the dike tree roots, soon to let the sea pour in. Eric ran. He turned a corner. He stopped and stared with horror. Flowing gently toward him down the sloping alley came a little trickling stream. Water, he whispered hoarsely. He dipped in his finger. It tasted of salt. Sea water. One dike tree must already have been eaten clean through. Not a second to lose, gasped Eric. I must dig up the stilts. Up the hill to the dike trees where the king's stilts lay buried, right into the very thick of niggers. They flapped and screeched above him. They hissed as he dug. Gritch, gritch, snarled the niggers. Gritch to you, snapped it back Eric, furiously pelting them with fistfuls of mud. The harder they fought him, the faster he dug. His fingers touched the stilts. At last he pulled them free from the ground. Still bouncing on his shoulder, again Eric ran. The road to the castle took him back through the town. The streets were still deserted. Close by the door of the old tailor shop, Eric stopped for an instant to rest. Stilts had begun to hurt his shoulders. Those two stupid guards, he thought. I wonder where they are. He found out all too soon. From around the corner at the very elbow suddenly bellowed the angry voice of Lord Droon. You guards! Guards indeed! A little pipsqueak of a boy! Tie up your spears! Thunderheads! Search every street! Search every house! Eric heard the chatter of their heavy hobnailed boots. No time to run, nowhere to hide. Wait! There's clothes in the tailor shop. Eric ducked inside. An instant later, Lord Droon and the guards appeared around the corner. Search that tailor shop first, commanded Lord Droon. But just as he said this, from out from a shop strode a strange, tall man. There was something very odd about the hang of his robe. His hat was pulled down far over his eyes. Those eyes, muttered Droon. Have I seen them before? He stepped in front of the tall man, blocking his path. The tall man's mouth went suddenly dry. Are you, he stammered hoarsely, are you by any chance seeking a small boy with no belt? Which way? Shouted the guards. Which way did he go? That way, said Eric, and he nodded toward the sea. With the collar hobnails, the two guards were off, Lord Droon sputtering and scolding along behind them. No time to shrink down to a boy again, thought Eric. I'll have to stay a tall man. On to the castle, Eric raced in the skies, over fences and thickets, through orchards and fields of corn. Everywhere he saw patrol cats, useless and limp, but asleep a haystack, dozing in the trees. And suddenly just ahead he saw the king. He was sitting on a little pile of stones just outside the castle gate. His robe was impressed, his crown was in shine, and he had deep-set circles under both of his eyes. Your Majesty, shouted Eric as he clattered up behind him. The king paid no attention. Eric leaned down and shouted right into his ear. Very slowly the king turned his head. Well, sighed King Bertram, and who may you be? I'm Eric, cried Eric. He let down the robe that was covering him, dropped to the ground. The king's own red stilts flashed bright in the sun. Down from the stilts leapt Eric, the page boy. Up onto the stilts sprang Bertram, the king. He drew a great kingly breath for the first one in weeks. His head shot up high, his chest broad and wide. Bertram had been sturdy, straight, and strong again, every inch a king. Patrol cats! It was the loudest command ever shouted in Vin. The king's voice seemed to roll up from deep in his boots. It echoed down the valleys. It rumbled through the hills. From wherever they had wandered, the cats heard the call. They fell in line. They fell in step. They marched ahead 1,000 strong. Up the hill through the dike trees. They followed Eric and the king. Day cast for the left flank, night cast for the right. Charge! The king shouted. 100,000 lizards stopped their pecking and sprang to meet the charge. The dike trees shook as the cats roared their war cry. The sea surface swirled into wild ranging whirlpools. Noise was heard in Sambaland, 500 miles away. The fur flew fast, but the feathers flew faster. It only took 10 minutes. The kingdom was saved. The townsfolk stopped trembling indoors behind their window shades. They rushed out from the house and filled the air with cheers. And then the king punished Droon in a most fitting way. He sent him to live by himself with a guard and patrol cats in that old deserted house with a sign that said measles. And he made him eat nizzards 3 times a day. Stewed nizzards for breakfast, cold nizzards for lunch, fried nizzards for suppers, and every other Thursday they served him nizzard hash. But to Eric, his page boy, the king gave a fine and just reward. He ordered the royal carpenter to make another pair of stilts, tall stilts, red and flashing, exactly like his own. From then on, every day at 5, they always raced on stilts together. And when they played, they really played, but when they worked, they really worked. And the cats kept the nizzards away from the dike trees, and the dike trees kept the water back out of the land. The end. Hope you enjoyed the story.